Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Yasser, for your kind invitation. I am very happy to be here on behalf of LIBER. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is to talk a bit, of course, about what LIBER is and why and how we are, as an organization, supporting open access. Also, I will give you some tips or some clues from LIBER's side on how research performance organizations can actually support open access, and to end up with a reflection of how libraries are actually drivers of open access movement nowadays. So what is LIBER? LIBER is the Association of European Research Libraries. We have more than 400 institutions being members of the association, over 40 countries. So it's a European, widely understood European association. We actually already have 20 Turkish members. So what is the main objective of LIBER as an association? Alicia was talking about the internet revolution, and I guess that we all agree that for libraries, the internet revolution has completely changed the scenario in which they work. So it's not, again, about islands anymore. We need to make sure that we work as a network, because through collaboration and cooperation, we will be able to develop services, new services to our researchers, our final users. And because as a network, we will be a strong voice in Europe. The role of libraries right now is in a complete changing moment. We are facing different stakeholders that were not there before, data centers, new ways of access to information. So we need to make sure that as a whole, as a community, the libraries change and continue providing the services that researchers are asking for, that of course are not what they were asking 20 years ago. So how does LIBER work? As I said, we have 400 members along the whole Europe, that they are the workforce of the reason of the association. They give us ideas, we make sure that we understand their needs, and they also help us to disseminate what LIBER is doing along Europe. We also have an executive board, and they are very much also members of all Europe, and this executive board is assuring that we do have a strategy, that we do know where we are going to. Of course, they represent the association along Europe, and they are very much in charge of the lobby I was talking about. They are making sure that the voice of libraries is heard in all the European Commission and all the international forums where we need to be heard. We also have steering committees. These steering committees are the groups that will make sure that the strategy is actually developed through several working groups and different networks. They work in those activities that the strategy states. And we also have the office in the Netherlands. We are 5 people there in the Netherlands, and we basically give support to the executive board and also to the steering committees to help them do their work. We also represent the association along Europe, and we started to participate in European projects, as I will explain later, because we really think that this participation will help realize our strategy and bring LIBER members on board of European projects. Okay, so what do we mainly do? As I mentioned, we do have a strategic plan that we will have a new strategy in 2013. It's a pity that I cannot present it yet. And this would be our, I'm not sure, just a second. Now it is, okay. So these are our priorities in the strategy. We do work in the scholarly communication field, and it is here where open access has a specific place in our strategy. But we don't only work with open access. We work with all the phases of a library, as you might know. So we also work with digitization and resource discovery. We need to make sure that what we have in our libraries is digitized in a good way and it's offered to the world in an interoperable way. We also work with heritage collections and preservation. and also with organization and human resources. We were talking about the librarian profession as something that is changing radically right now. We have to develop new skills, new ways of facing the information science in the library. We also participate in European projects, and we also do so if they fit in the strategy, if they help us actually realize the strategy. We very much care about lobbying in the European Commission because many important things are being discussed right now in the Commission. Alicia mentioned Horizon 2020. They are discussing about how far they are going to go with open access, data, etc. So we need to make sure that we are there to lobby for our interests. We also have several publications in our webpage regarding different issues that you might be interested. One of our main issues is also our annual conference. Maybe some of you already attended. It's a year annual conference. It's 450 delegates coming together, librarians from all over Europe. And of course, and this is basic for us, networking. So that we make sure that libraries are not islands in Europe anymore, but that the communication is fluent among us. These are our current portfolio of European projects. I have divided them in different ideas. So with two of them, we are working with Europeana to make sure that some of the content that is right now in the research libraries in Europe is digitized and made open through Europeana portal and the European Library. And we are also doing the same with newspaper, which is a very interesting project because we are making available in the internet many newspapers from the in-between wars in Europe, which is a fascinating content. We are also working in infrastructure. Alicia spoke about that very much, and I cannot agree more. We need to make sure that libraries create an infrastructure in a network way so that researchers are able to use information in a different way as they used to. And of course, we are also very interested in policies. That's why we are participating in Meadow. And the project is especially interesting for us because it works in an area of Europe that we are very interested in too. We want to make sure that the south of Europe and East Europe become part of the European research area as much as the north of Europe. I will go a little bit through the projects, very brief information about the five of them. So we are working in opportunities for data exchange. Also, Alicia mentioned the idea of research data as the new information that we will need to make sure it's available, reusable, and preserved. So, as I said, this project focuses very much on research data. That is the new buzzword in the information science, and it's really important that we define what we mean by research data, what kind of data we have, how do we assure correct data sharing, how do we assure its reuse, how do we assure the preservation, and what is most important for LIBER, what is the role of libraries in this? Because we are competing in a way with new professionals, IT services, data centers, etc. So we really need to find a role for libraries in this new field of information. We are also working in APARSEN, the Alliance for Permanent Access to the Record of Science in Europe network. We will discuss that later, but preservation is an unsolved thing in the library world. You will see in the results of Turkey that are very similar to those obtained in different countries in Europe. Preservation is an unsolved issue in digital repositories, and it's something that we need to start thinking about. Europeana Libraries, as I said, it's a project that will make 5 million digital objects from 19 European libraries available through the European Library portal and Europeana websites. this project will have its continuation in what we will call Europeana Cloud. And again, I have to quote Alicia. It's not only about a portal where you can find information. Now that there's enough content in the European Library, it's about what we can do with it. How can we make this data available for researchers through APIs, through different services that make sure that this information is used by researchers. Europeana Newspaper is another project that we are working in, and it will provide more than 18 million newspaper pages to the Europeana service. And we are also working with more modern digitization processes. We are not talking only about digitizing a newspaper, but also make sure that the information in the newspaper is exploitable and usable. So we are working with different refinement processes. And finally, Meadow, that's the reason why we are here. So the whole project of Meadow has to do with coordinating open access policies in the region. There are many different initiatives and projects in the south of Europe, but we were not so sure that we were aware of what the country next door was doing. And that's why Meadow makes sense in the sense that we will have a picture of how the south of Europe is doing with open access and how altogether we can improve the performance of open access. Okay, so that's regarding the European projects, but as I said, we also are very interested in the lobbying process in the European level. These are some of the examples where LIBER has had a strong voice. We are very much interested in the copyright issues in the European level, and we are signatories of a memorandum of understanding for out-of-commerce works on behalf of the European Research Libraries. We are also working in the digitization policy-making process, and we are also very active in the definition of the European research area, what it is and what libraries can do there. This is the annual conference, one of our most successful activities right now. Last year it was in Tartu, this year it's going to be in Munich. You are all more than welcome. Okay, so why and how LIBER believes in open access? This is maybe very obvious, but I think it's worth it to mention and to keep saying why open access is the way to go in the next years. For researchers, because it increases visibility, usage, and it will also give different rights that researchers do not have right now on the information. And also because it will provide researchers with new ways of research, that data-driven research that we've been talking about this morning. For institutions, it's crucial because it will give equal access to information to all institutions. There was a paper published some years ago from the World Health Organization, and it was a survey worldwide. There are many institutions in the world, libraries in the world, that do not have subscriptions to the basic information because they don't have money and they don't expect to have it. So open access will guarantee an equal access to information to all the researchers in the world. To society, it's also a challenge to, and also, if I may, even a right to society to have access to the information that is being paid with public money. And there is also a belief that small organizations will benefit from the access to information because the small companies right now do not have access to basic research information that is behind paywalls. This is a bit the scenario about how green open access and gold open access is right now in the world. As you can see, we are talking about more than 2,000 repositories worldwide right now, basically with articles and theses as content. Hopefully, we will also have data soon. Regarding gold open access, which is also a way to provide open access to information, more than 8,000 open access journals are registered in the directory of open access journals, which is quite a number already. We have to. It would be nice to mention some issues about gold open access. You all know that we also have hybrid models in which both open access articles and pay articles are being offered. This is an issue that we need to be aware of, because we need to make sure that we avoid double dipping, in the way that we need to avoid that journals actually charge the authors and charge the institutions again to access the information. But it's a way to provide gold open access. But we have to be careful with what we call hybrid journals and how that is offered to in the institutions. And also, a basic idea about gold open access is that it is a must that they have extensive usage rights. Otherwise, we are talking about changing who's paying for the information. But if the information is in a PDF again, and there's nothing I can do with that but read, that is not pure gold open access. And we should try not to go there, because we are not talking, with open access, we are not talking about a change in the business model. We are talking about a change about how information is used. Okay, so what's the state of open access in the European Union right now? We've been talking about European research area, and at the end, the idea of the European research area has to do with world-class research infrastructure, and here is where scholarly communication must be embedded in the research infrastructure of Europe, stronger research organizations, and sharing of knowledge. So as you can see here, the role of libraries of information science professionals is vital in the construction of the European research area. And it will be even more in Horizon 2020. Open access to research papers is going to be a must, and they are about to accept that open access to data will be a pilot in Horizon 2020. Again, we are talking about the role of libraries in the new area. As you can see here, the role that libraries can play in providing open access to papers, and in training, providing access, and teaching how to use data to researchers is also a key role of libraries in Horizon 2020. And open access in the European Union is a fact. I just listed here some projects, initiatives, policies that are around Europe. And as you can see, funding agencies, universities, the infrastructure, everything is building at the same time, and hopefully will get better in the next years. So regarding policies, we've talked about FP7 pilot, Horizon 2020, the research councils of UK just approved an open access policy, Wellcome Trust, and many national funding agencies are supporting open access with the money they are funding. Infrastructure. In Europe, we have a growing number of institutional repositories that are very much working together, trying to guarantee interoperability, developing of services. Best example of that is both projects OpenAir and OpenAir Plus. COAR is playing a key role also in assuring that the Green Road repositories are interoperable and growing in services. There are many open access journals too in Europe and growing. And the awareness of researchers, which is maybe the weak point of all that, is also increasing, because with projects like OpenAir and OpenAir Plus, the message is arriving to researchers. So in all this atmosphere, Liber strongly believes in open access as a part of what we call the open scholarship and open knowledge that Alicia also mentioned. Both Liber and Liber members are participating actively in many different projects, both in the Gold Open Access Road and the Green Open Access. And we are strongly collaborating with COAR and Spark to guarantee an open access friendly atmosphere in Europe, and also to help create the research infrastructure that is needed. So what are our key areas in working in open access in LIBER? As we say, we are strongly lobbying to stimulate open access policies along Europe. We are talking with the European Commission, and we are also doing policy-making projects through Meadow and Ed. We are also supporting the building of an open access scholarly communication infrastructure and exploring new business models for gold open access. Many LIBER members are participating in OpenAir and OpenAir Plus, and we are also running DART, which is the portal for European theses. This is one of those examples on how libraries can cooperate and can create something bigger than themselves in a network. I will explain you about DART later. And we are also very much worried and trying to work as fast as possible in the idea of the role of libraries in research data management. What is the role of libraries? What skills will be needed? How can LIBER work for research libraries to be identified as a key player in the research data management, etc. I was mentioning DART. I would like to talk about this a bit more and how, again, working in an interoperable atmosphere and interoperable infrastructure can help us build services on top of repositories which are extremely powerful. DART is the European Open Access thesis portal, and we are working right now. So it's a portal that gives open access to more than almost 400,000 theses along Europe from 500 universities in 27 European countries. So on top of those repositories with theses, we have developed a portal that will allow the user to find information about all these theses and, of course, the full open access. This portal was created on the idea that research theses openly available are much more downloaded than papers. And it's actually a very successful project we have. Well, service, it's not a project anymore. Okay, so now the question how research performance organizations can support open access. And here I am going to steal the roadmap towards open access that was written by the LERU, which is the League of European Research Libraries. LERU is an association of probably the best universities of Europe. I think there are 20 universities right now. And they published some years ago how universities should go through the open access road. We believe that their recommendations are, if they are good for them, they are good for everybody, and that's why I'm going to go a little bit through the report, and I strongly recommend the reading of the paper because it's very clarifying and it gives you good ideas. So some of the findings of the LERU roadmap, and this is, I think, very important, is that open access needs to be viewed in a wider context of open scholarship and open knowledge. We are not talking about a free access to the paper, the research paper as we used to know the paper. And another idea that LERU suggests is that each university should appoint something called like the senior officer to act as open access champion. I believe that almost every university has one open access advocate, but to make it official, an official appointment as the open access representation in the university. So that is also the idea of making things less informal as they've been so far. Okay, LERU also has found niche in the monograph publishing. So right now in the current crisis situation, the publishing of monographs, especially in social sciences and humanities, is probably a good way to start thinking about open access in the university through monographs. What does Leroux roadmap says about the green route? So they believe in institutional repositories as the basics for open access approaches in the universities. They have estimated the cost of each repository, and I have tried to cross the recommendations of Leroux with the survey that was developed in Turkey about how open access is being performed in research universities. So this recommendation of Leroux of having an institutional repository seems to be followed in Turkey. So 2/3 of the Turkish university have already an institutional repository, which is good news. Again, I have to quote Alicia. Without a communication strategy on the green route, nothing is done. I mean, you can have a repository completely empty. So you need to make sure that you do have a communication strategy together with the repository. Universities need to be clear about what type of material is being deposited. The message to researchers has to be clear. And here again, in comparison to the results of Turkey, I would say clear about what they have to deposit and also when. 5 universities in Turkey do not specify in their policies when the paper has to be deposited. So again, the clearer the mandate, the better for the strategy. And of course, the open access strategy should be embedded in pan-university strategies, probably national strategies if possible, which is not an easy task sometimes, but we are talking about a network, we are talking about being something else than the university, so it's essential that the repository belongs to something bigger than itself. Leroux universities can consider adopting open access mandates at an institutional level. This is vital. Universities need to have mandates about open access. In the case of Turkey, 15 Turkish universities out of 29 research performance organizations have a policy already, which is also good news. Leroux strongly recommends that authors should not assign their copyright to publishers. This is the current practice in Europe and almost and in many other places in the world. Authors just give their copyright away to publishers. What the Leroux roadmap is suggesting is that authors grant a non-exclusive right to the publisher. In the case of Turkey, I'm reading through the results of the survey, and it's not the case of Turkey. I would say it's very much the same in the whole Europe. Copyright is still an unsolved issue in the institutions with publishers. Some publishers don't even really know what they are doing with the copyright, so it's clearly a field that has to be improved. And again, Leroux has identified something that you can also see in the Turkey's Meadow survey. There is a gap in the European infrastructure for long-term secure digital preservation. That is a challenge that it has to be faced as soon as possible, but there's still no policies, no common policies in Europe. 2/3 of the Turkish institutions have no policies regarding long-term preservation. As I say, these numbers are not very much different to the rest of the countries in South of Europe, and I would dare to say North Europe. Okay, so what does Leroux say about the gold route? The gold route is an answer to the changes that are taking place in scholarly publishing across the world. The digital revolution that we've been talking about makes a bit ridiculous the idea of having to pay or having to wait to have access to the information. So that is why gold open access makes sense in the current world. There is a need to explore sustainable business model for gold open access, and in the two ways, in the full open access journals and also in the hybrid journals. LERU members are happy to investigate different business models with publishers, and that is an idea that can be brought to Turkey too. With the university presses, etc., there are space to explore and to research new ways of business models. LERU accepts that these changes, this changing period through the gold open access, the full open access to information is going to cost money to institutions. As you know, in UK, they are expecting to increase their expenses in information in tens of millions of pounds in the next years to guarantee open access. This is probably true, but there's also cheaper ways to get to the full open access. And as I say, LERU is very interested in working in the open access monograph publishers world. This is also very, very interesting. It's been done in the Netherlands, I believe, and also in UK. There is a need to study what is the university commitment to the current publishing models. So our researchers are writing the papers, our researchers are peer reviewing the papers, they are memberships of the editorial boards. So the big question would be how much, because we are talking about sustainability, but how much money we are currently spending, public money, in the current publishing system. As I say, there are some papers in the Netherlands and I believe in UK, but this is something interesting to actually identify how much money we are spending in publishing models right now. This study, of course, would be the basis of, or the baseline for a future development into the open access arena with more information, more financial information about how much money the publishing system is costing us now. We will be able to propose alternatives. And just to finish my talk, I would like to share with you this slide, which is the idea that research libraries are in the center of the open access movement, and they need to be there because we are very much close to the funding agencies, and we together as libraries can make sure that the bottom-up initiatives go to the funding agencies. It has happened in many countries already, and it's the way to go probably. The research libraries are also very close to the institutional boards, to the deans of the universities, etc., to make sure that correct mandates and advocacy programs are put in place. But we are also very close to publishers, and libraries have to make sure that good deals are achieved with publishers. And it is maybe the moment, as Alicia suggested, to try to negotiate open access friendly licenses or even to establish gold open access projects with them. And again, research libraries, or at least LIBER believes so, will play a key role in open data and is playing a key role in institutional repositories in liaison with IT departments, etc. And again, with researchers. Among all these people that we are talking here, funding agencies, institutional boards, publishers, the institution that is closer to the researchers and that should be even closer are the libraries. So we really need to make sure that libraries play a key role in the open access movement. And that's all for today. Thank you very much.
Çalışırken Open Access için karşılaştığınız en büyük problem neydi?
So open access is a tricky road. So I would say that there are many difficulties in working with open access. If I go back to, so this is all the people that you have to influence and that you need to make sure that they are aligned with the idea. So if I look at the picture of how Europe is working right now, funding agencies are getting into the open access idea because they have bought the idea that publicly funded research should be open. Funding agencies are on board, slowly but on board, and also institutions. So I would say that both researchers, in a way, because of all the problems that Alicia has told, and how to make sure that publishers are also on board is the most tricky, difficult part. Publishers need to change their business models, and sometimes it's not that easy because they are monsters. I mean, Elsevier is a monster, not in a bad way, yeah? I mean in size. It's so big, and they need to make sure that they adjust to the new idea of open access. But even though, I don't know if Alicia would agree, it's more difficult to get researchers on board because the message is very difficult for, the message doesn't get there. We have the Open Air Plus and the Open Air project. The message gets to the libraries, but it's very difficult for a librarian or for an for a repository manager to get in touch with 2,000, 20,000 researchers in their institution. So I would say that the weak point of the open access today is probably researchers. I don't know if you agree, Alicia.
Açık arşiv olduğundan dünya çapında söz ettiler. Bunların ne kadarı kurumsal, ne kadarı konu bazında oran olarak diye merak ettim. Bu soruyu sorma nedenim de ben bir kurumsal arşiv oluşturmak istiyorum üniversitemde ama hocalarla konuştuğumda örneğin işletme iktisat fakültesinden hocalarımız REPEC'te biz kendi camiamız içinde bunu paylaşıyoruz. İkinci bir ortama ihtiyaç duymuyoruz türünden yorumlar yapabiliyorlar. Dünya çapında bu dengelerin konu bazlı arşivlerle kurumsal arşivler arasında durumun ne olduğu hakkında görüşlerini almak isterim. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to give you my impression, but I think this is completely a question for Alicia. I'm not sure if this graphic I saw you can see if it's either thematic or institutional, but I would dare to say that from the 2000, almost all of them are institutional repositories. But the thematic ones are few, but very strong. So PubMed Central, Archive, REPEC, right? I mean, there are some thematic repositories that have a long story and that are extremely powerful, and that's why researchers on those fields don't care about the institutional repository because they already have theirs. For physics archive, for biomedical field, PubMed Central. I think that there is a combination on both because, as Alicia said, it's not important where the paper is deposited. What is important is that whatever it is deposited, it's interoperable enough to be found, to be used, etc. So I don't think that if you work in a university, you have a space there for your repository, because you can always link the paper of those researchers that are working in a thematic repository, you can always link it, and there's always ways to interconnect the information. Do you have something else to say, Alicia?
Thank you. So these are two different repositories in objectives. Disciplinary repositories are for the researchers to exchange information faster before publication and in their field. So they are very important for them. Institutional repositories are meant for the institution to have control over the intellectual production of their community. So the key, as she says, is we have to let the researcher to put the articles wherever they feel better. If they prefer disciplinary repositories, it's fine. But then the institution has the responsibility to link that article to the institutional repository in a seamless way. So in this distributed world, it can be in the disciplinary repository, but the institutional repository has to have also the link to the article. So I don't think there is competition or any problem if we organize the interoperability of the infrastructure in good shape.
Ben bu sorumu açık erişimle ilgili değil de biraz Liber'le ilgili sorayım. Burada birçok kütüphaneci meslektaşımız var. Liber'in sağladığı burslarla ilgili, kütüphanecilerle sağladığı burslarla ilgili biraz bilgi verebilir misin? Ne tür imkanlar sunuyor Liber kütüphaneciler için?
Okay, so I'm not sure if I understood your question. I think you're asking about scholarlips or, okay. So we do have, so for the memberships, we have different prices depending on the country. So for Europe is one price, for members of the Council of Europe is another. But for specific librarians, we do have some awards for the annual conference, because sometimes it's not that easy for librarians to go to the conference. And Liber strongly believes that it's a very nice venue for libraries to get to know each other, etc. So we do have what we call the Liber Awards, and I believe it's up to 8 scholarships to go to the annual conference, and that provides, I think, a free registration to the conference plus some money for the travel and the hotel. And it's 8 scholarships in the price of 500 euros or something like that. So the way it works is that the librarian that wants to attend the conference will compete with the rest of the delegates in the peer review process of their call for papers. But if the paper is accepted and the librarian comes from a given number of countries in which Turkey is included, the registration and coming to the conference is for free.